Rain hadn't stopped falling on Millbrook, Ohio for 3 days straight, and Sarah Whitfield sat in her car outside the Blue Moon Diner at 2 in the morning, watching the water streak down her windshield, like the world itself was crying with her. Her phone screen glowed with the message she'd read 17 times now. Her father's health insurance had lapsed. The surgery he needed couldn't happen without the family plan her new job would give her, and that job needed her to be married. It was a ridiculous, archaic requirement buried in the fine print of a rural teaching position that came with a spousal health care bundle too good to pass up. The only affordable option left after her father's own coverage fell through. She had 6 weeks to figure out an impossible problem, and she was out of ideas. That was when she saw Daniel Chen's truck pull into the lot. She hadn't planned it. She hadn't even known he'd be there. But some instinct made her get out of her car and walk through the rain to knock on his window, her hair plastered to her face, mascara running, looking like exactly the kind of desperate that she was. Daniel rolled the window down, concern flashing across his face before she'd said a single word. "Sarah? What's wrong?" They'd known each other since the 10th grade, back when Daniel was the quiet kid who transferred in from Cleveland, the only Chinese-American student, in a school where everyone else had lived in Millbrook for 3 generations. Sarah remembered the winter dance that year, how she'd noticed him standing by the punch bowl, not because he was awkward, but because he was watching everyone else with this quiet, careful kindness, like he was cataloging who needed a kind word and who needed to be left alone. She'd asked him to dance because nobody else had the nerve to, and he'd said yes so fast it surprised them both. They'd been friends ever since, just friends, always friends, through his community college years and her 4 years at Ohio State, through her failed engagement to a man named Marcus who'd decided 2 months before the wedding that he wasn't ready, through Daniel's own string of relationships that never seemed to stick. He was the person she called when something broke, literally or otherwise. He fixed her car. He'd helped her move apartments 3 times. He showed up, now, soaked to the bone in a diner parking lot. She said the only thing she had left to say. "I need a husband for 90 days. Daniel blinked. "What?" She told him everything in a rush. The job, her father's surgery, the insurance requirement, the 6-week deadline. She told him it was insane, that she had no right to ask, that she'd understand completely if he said no, that she was probably about to lose the only real friend. She had left because of how unhinged this request sounded out loud. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Rain drummed against the truck's roof. Somewhere inside the diner, a bell rang as someone ordered late-night pie. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll marry you." Sarah stared at him, waiting for the joke, the qualifier, the but. It didn't come. "Just like that?" she asked. "Sarah, I've known you 17 years. If you're standing in the rain at 2 in the morning asking me this, it's because you're out of other options. And because some part of you trusts me enough to ask. I'm not going to make you beg for something I'd already say yes to." What he didn't say, what he'd never said in 17 years, was that he'd loved her since that winter dance. Since the moment she'd crossed a crowded gymnasium to ask a transfer. Student to dance when nobody else would. Look at him twice. He'd loved her through her engagement, sending a card and meaning every practiced word of congratulations, while something in his chest quietly broke. He'd loved her through every phone call where she talked about other men, every Thanksgiving where she brought a date to his family's dinner because his mother had insisted on including her. Every year he told himself this was the year he'd say something and then didn't. Because friendship with Sarah Whitfield felt like more than most people got with anyone. And he was terrified of losing even that. The wedding happened 3 weeks later at the county courthouse. Sarah's father, thin and gray but stable enough to attend in a wheelchair, cried through the entire 5-minute ceremony. Daniel's mother brought a red envelope, an old tradition, and pressed it into Sarah's hands with a knowing look that Sarah didn't understand yet. Daniel wore his one good suit. Sarah wore a blue dress she'd bought off a clearance rack, because a real wedding dress felt like a lie neither of them needed. They moved into Daniel's small house on Cedar Street into separate bedrooms, with an agreement written out on a legal pad that Sarah had, drafted with the seriousness of a contract lawyer. 90 days. No expectations, no feelings, friends helping friends. Daniel signed it without argument, though something in him ached reading the words, no feelings, because he had nothing but feelings and had for a decade. The strange part was how easy it was. They fell into a rhythm that surprised them both. Coffee in the mornings, arguing over whose turn it was to do dishes, Sarah grading papers at the kitchen table while Daniel worked on invoices for his contracting business. The small domestic choreography of 2 people who already knew each other's rhythms from years of friendship. Sarah's father's surgery happened in week 4 and went well. The insurance covered everything. Sarah cried in the hospital parking lot from relief, and Daniel held her without a word. because some things didn't need commentary. Somewhere around week 6, Sarah stopped counting down the days. She noticed it first in small things. The way Daniel remembered. She liked her coffee slightly too sweet and started making it that way, without being asked. The way he'd leave the porch light on if she was coming home late. Not because she asked him to, but because he worried. The way he laughed at her. Terrible jokes like they were the funniest things he'd ever heard. And the way she'd started laughing at his terrible jokes right back, leaning into a life that felt less like an arrangement and more like something real. She noticed it in herself too. The flutter she felt when he came home covered in sawdust from a job site. The way she found herself waiting up for him. The way 90 days suddenly felt too short instead of a countdown to relief. It was week 11 past the deadline they'd set. Neither of them having mentioned the ending when Sarah found the box. She hadn't meant to snoop. She'd been looking for tape in his closet and found, instead, a shoebox full of old things. Movie ticket stubs from a night she barely remembered. A folded program from their high school winter dance. A photograph of the two of them at 19 that she didn't even know existed. At the bottom, a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases like it had been opened and closed 100 times. It was a letter, dated the year after high school, never sent. Sarah, I don't know how to say this without ruining everything, so maybe I never will. But I need to write it down somewhere, even if you never read it. I've loved you since the winter dance. Since you crossed that gym floor like it was nothing, like I was worth crossing a room for. I don't think you'll ever see me that way. And I've made my peace with being your friend, because your friendship is more than most people get from anyone in a lifetime. But I wanted somewhere for this to exist, for someone to know, even if it's just me. Sarah sat on the closet floor for a long time, the letter in her hands. 10 years of quiet devotion folded into a single page. When Daniel came home that evening, he found her sitting at the kitchen table with the letter in front of her, and his stomach dropped. Sarah, I can explain. Is it still true? She asked. He stopped. What? The letter. Is it still true? He could have lied. He could have made a joke. Deflected the way he'd trained himself to for a decade. But something in the way she asked, something unguarded and hopeful in her voice that he'd never heard directed at him before, made him tell the truth instead. It's more true than it's ever been, he said quietly. I've loved you since I was 15 years old. Sarah, I married you knowing I'd have to let you go in. 90 days and I told myself that was enough, that just having this much of you was more than I deserved to hope for. Sarah stood up and crossed the kitchen the way she'd crossed that gym floor 11 years ago, closing the distance between them like it was nothing at all. I don't want 90 days, she said. I don't want an ending. I think I've been falling in love with my best friend for 6 weeks, and I was too scared to say it because I thought this was supposed to be temporary. It doesn't have to be, Daniel said, his voice breaking. Then don't let it be. He kissed her then, 10 years of waiting folded into a single moment. And Sarah kissed him back, with the full weight of finally, understanding what she'd been standing next to her whole life without seeing. They tore up the legal pad agreement that night. 6 months later, they had a real wedding, a small one, in the same county courthouse. But this time Sarah wore a dress she'd chosen because she wanted to, not because it was cheap enough for a lie. Daniel's mother cried through the whole thing, this time with no knowing look required, because everyone already knew. Sarah's father walked her down the short aisle in his wheelchair, healthy enough now to hold her hand and whisper that he'd always liked Daniel, had always secretly hoped, in the quiet way fathers hope, that his daughter would someday see what had been standing beside her all along. Some love stories start with lightning, others take 10 years. A rainstorm, a desperate favor, and a shoebox of forgotten letters to finally find their way home. But when they arrive whole, tested by time and patient beyond reason. The kind of love that doesn't need to be loud to be real, only true.